There are moments in life when everything around you is screaming, noise, chaos, urgency. Yet strangely, within you there is only silence. Not the comforting silence of peace, but a heavier one. A silence that feels ancient, almost sacred, like a forgotten temple standing in ruins. It is not the silence of rest, but of memory. The silence of something buried so long ago that when it stirs, you cannot ignore it. Because this voice does not come from the world outside, it rises from the very core of your being. Have you ever heard it? That whisper, gentle but fierce, that dares to ask, "What are you doing with your life?" It is not the voice of deadlines, responsibilities, or social opinion. Those belong to the outer world. This voice is older, wiser. It is the voice of the soul, the self you have neglected, the self you silenced, perhaps for years, perhaps for decades. Carl Jung believed that the greatest illness of modern humanity was this disconnection from the soul. But long before Jung, across cultures and centuries, humans recognized this same haunting silence. The desert fathers of early Christianity fled into barren wastelands, not to escape life, but to confront this inner voice in solitude. Native shamans entered trance through drumming and fire, listening for guidance not from the tribe, but from the depths of spirit. Even Socrates spoke of his daimon, a mysterious inner voice that advised him when words and logic failed. All of them, across time, knew the cost of ignoring silence, a life lived without truth. And yet, in our age of endless distraction, we resist this silence more than ever. We run from it, fill it with noise, cling to anything that will prevent us from hearing that whisper. But the more we run, the louder it becomes, because the silence is not emptiness. It is presence. It is the moment your true self knocks at the door you've locked from the inside. We spend our lives chasing after other people's dreams, reshaping ourselves to fit molds never meant for us. We become what others desire: the obedient child, the successful worker, the agreeable friend. Outwardly, our lives may seem full, even overflowing. Yet inwardly, something withers. Slowly, day by day, drop by drop, the spirit bleeds out. And then one day, without realizing when it began, you wake up with a hollow ache. Not an emptiness of possessions, but something deeper, a fracture at the very center of who you are. Outwardly, you smile. Inwardly, something has gone missing. This is not new. Ancient poets described it as exile from oneself. Medieval mystics called it the absence of God. Today, Jung would call it disconnection from the self. But no matter the language, the feeling is the same, a life lived far from its own center. So ask yourself, have you felt it? Have you ever sensed that you are living a life that is not yours? As if every day you are performing in a play you did not write, speaking lines you did not choose. That is the threshold. That is the haunting silence that signals the soul is waiting. It does not shout, but it will not leave. It waits like an ancient echo for you to turn and listen. Because this silence is not your enemy. It is your invitation. An invitation to begin the journey inward. An invitation to remember what has been forgotten. An invitation to walk the first step toward becoming whole again. We live in a world of mirrors, and often those mirrors do not reflect who we are, but who others expect us to be. From the moment we are born, layers of expectation begin to press upon us. Parents project their unfulfilled dreams. Society lays down its rules. Schools train us to perform rather than to think. Slowly, imperceptibly, we begin to bend, to twist, to mold ourselves into shapes that were never truly ours. On the surface, it works. We become likable, responsible, successful, whatever word society prefers to place as a badge of honor. But deep within, something starts to fracture. Jung warned that the most dangerous split in modern life is not between nations or classes, but between the individual and their own soul. And this fracture does not come in a single shattering moment. It comes as a slow erosion, each time you silence your true voice just to be accepted. Each time you say yes while your whole being is screaming no. Each time you choose to be polite rather than honest. Drop by drop, the soul leaks away. History itself is full of these masks. In the Renaissance courts of Europe, noblemen and women perfected the art of performance. Endless etiquette, rehearsed gestures, every word carefully chosen to impress. Beneath the silk and velvet, behind the music and pageantry, lived a suffocating fear of breaking the illusion. In Victorian England, morality was staged like a theater. Passions and desires were pressed beneath layers of lace, duty, and repression. And across all ages, societies have demanded masks from their people. The warrior must hide his grief, the mother her exhaustion, the leader his doubts. The persona, as Jung called it, is the social mask we wear so that we can function in the world. And the mask is not entirely evil. It has its place. Without it, we could not navigate communities, workplaces, or relationships. But the danger comes when we forget it is a mask, when the actor becomes lost in the character. Then the performance consumes the performer. Perhaps you've felt this. You smile when you want to weep. You agree when your spirit longs to refuse. You nod politely at words that wound you. Outwardly, nothing seems wrong. Inwardly, you feel like a stranger in your own life. The mask has fused to your skin, and you no longer remember the face beneath it. Cultures across the world understood this danger. The Greeks carved masks for their tragedies, but they knew that behind the painted face was a living actor. Their plays reminded audiences of this duality: appearance versus reality, mask versus truth. In Japan, the No Theater developed masks so haunting, so ambiguous, that they seemed to breathe with the hidden emotions of the actor. Both cultures warned us, forget the mask at your peril. And yet, we forget. In our quest for belonging, we pay the highest price of all, ourselves. That is why Jung's words cut so deeply, even today. When you live as a mask for too long, your soul retreats. It doesn't vanish, but it waits, silent and patient, beneath the layers. You may think you are thriving, yet deep down you are drifting further from the truth of who you are. One day the performance falters. The carefully rehearsed lines lose their meaning. The applause no longer satisfies. And in the sudden quiet that follows, you realize you have built a life that does not belong to you. A mask, no matter how polished, can never take the place of a soul. Every mask has a cost. Every truth we bury does not disappear. It sinks into the depths, waiting. This is what Carl Jung called the shadow, the unacknowledged parts of ourselves that we exile, suppress, or deny. At first, it seems harmless. You tell yourself, I don't need to feel this anger. Or, I'll hide this desire. It doesn't fit who I'm supposed to be. You swallow the grief, you smother the rage, you pretend the fear isn't there. But what is silenced does not die. It grows, it mutates, and eventually it begins to rule you from the dark. You may notice it in strange ways. An inexplicable bitterness toward life, a sudden surge of jealousy, the gnawing anxiety that lingers even when everything looks perfect. Each of these is the shadow calling out, saying, "You cannot ignore me forever." And the more you deny it, the more power it gains. History gives us countless warnings. Think of Shakespeare's Hamlet. Paralyzed by the ghosts of indecision and buried grief, his shadow consumes him until it destroys not only himself, but everyone around him. Or Macbeth, driven by ambition he could not admit openly, whose repressed hunger twists into murder and madness. These characters endure because they are not just stories, they are mirrors of us. They show what happens when the shadow remains unspoken. Even myths echo this truth. The Greeks spoke of Pandora, who opened a jar that released all hidden evils into the world, desires, pains, fears. The message was clear. What is locked away in darkness cannot remain hidden forever. In another sense, the shadow is like the Greek daimon, a spirit, both guardian and destroyer, depending on whether it is acknowledged or ignored. And so it is in our lives. How many times have you said yes when you meant no, only to feel resentment rotting quietly inside you? How many times have you pushed down grief until it hardened into cynicism? Each time we betray ourselves, the shadow grows heavier. It sits in the unconscious like lead, dragging down the soul. But here lies the paradox. The shadow is not evil. It is not a monster to be slain. It is a part of you, your unexpressed grief, your hidden tenderness, your unmet longing, your unspoken truth. These are not curses. They are fragments of your wholeness, exiled, because the world once told you they were unacceptable. Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Consider how often we blame bad luck for the repeated cycles in our lives, broken relationships, destructive habits, the same mistakes replayed endlessly. These are not coincidences. They are the shadow at work, trying to be seen, pulling the strings from behind the curtain. What we refuse to face in ourselves, we act out blindly. And the shadow does not merely wound us. It seeps into our relationships, shaping the way we love and the way we harm. It whispers through projection, turning others into scapegoats for the very qualities we cannot admit in ourselves. That sharp criticism of someone's arrogance, could it be your own pride, disowned and despised? That fascination with another's strength, could it be your own potential, waiting for permission to awaken? If you listen closely, the shadow is not trying to destroy you. It is asking to be embraced. It longs not for punishment, but for reconciliation. Like a child locked away too long, it waits for you to finally open the door and say, I see you. You belong. This is the weight we all carry, the silent shadow beneath the mask. And until we face it, until we descend into that darkness with courage, we will never know the true freedom of wholeness. What waits beyond the shadow? Jung called it individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not flawless, not some idealized version of yourself, but real. To individuate is to gather the lost fragments, to bring the mask and the shadow into conversation, to unite what has been divided. It is the long journey back to the self. This path is not new. It has always been written in the great stories of humanity. Odysseus wandering for 10 years, facing monsters, temptations, storms, not only to return to Ithaca, but to return to himself. Dante descending into hell in the Divine Comedy, walking through shadows before rising into the light. Siddhartha Gautama, seated beneath the Bodhi tree, refusing to move until he faced Mara, the embodiment of all fear and desire. And in that confrontation awakening as the Buddha. These are not just myths, they are maps of the inner landscape. They remind us that before rebirth comes descent. Before awakening comes darkness. Individuation is like alchemy. The alchemists believed base metals could be transformed into gold, but Jung saw in their writings a hidden metaphor. The true alchemy was not about matter, but about the soul. The lead of our unconscious, the shadow, the pain, the forgotten parts of ourselves, must be melted, faced, and transformed. Only then can the gold of the self emerge. But this is no easy task. It means stripping away identities you've worn for years, identities that gave you safety, belonging, recognition. It means letting old versions of yourself die. The ancient mystics knew this as the dark night of the soul, where faith falters, illusions crumble, and you are left naked before your own truth. And yet there is no other way. The persona cannot carry you to wholeness. The shadow cannot remain locked away. They must meet, and in that meeting, a new self is born. Perhaps you've felt glimpses of it. That strange sense of clarity after a great failure, when something inside you whispers, "Now you know who you are." That sudden freedom after a loss, painful as it is, that reveals what you can no longer pretend to be. In these moments, individuation has already begun. And what lies on the other side? Not control, not dominance, not the shallow triumphs the world celebrates. The fruit of individuation is something quieter, something unshakable, the sense of living in alignment with your own center. It is not the power of having more, but the power of being whole. The journey is not straight. It is a spiral, returning again and again to old wounds, each time seeing them differently, integrating more deeply. There is no map, no universal formula. Each person must walk their own path, guided by their inner compass. And yet, the archetypal echoes remain the same. The hero descends, the seeker faces the dragon, the soul finds its gold in the depths. And so the question becomes, will you dare? Will you choose to keep wearing the mask, carrying the shadow in silence, drifting further from yourself? Or will you take the first step into the labyrinth, knowing the only way out is through? Because individuation is not a luxury, it is not for the few, it is the birthright of every soul. And to ignore it is to live half a life of masks and shadows, never tasting the fullness of who you are meant to be. When you look at another person, what do you truly see? Their face, their gestures, their words, yes. But beneath that, what your eyes and heart perceive is far more complex. You are looking into a mirror, not a mirror of glass, but a living reflection of yourself. Jung called this projection. The qualities we repress, deny, or secretly long for do not vanish. Instead, we cast them outward onto the people around us. It is why you may feel sudden anger at someone you barely know, why you are inexplicably drawn to a stranger's presence, why a friend's flaw feels unbearable to you, even though others barely notice it. These are not random reactions. They are signals. They are the unconscious trying to reveal itself through the faces of others. History is filled with the consequences of projection. Consider the witch trials of early modern Europe. Communities, terrified of their own suppressed desires and fears, cast them outward onto women who became scapegoats. The witch was not real. She was the shadow of the village made flesh. Or take the waves of fanatic devotion that often surround charismatic leaders. People project their own dormant strength, wisdom, or courage onto a figurehead, forgetting that what they admire is a potential within themselves. Even in personal relationships, projection shapes our bonds. The lover who idealizes their partner is often gazing not at the other, but at their own unawakened qualities, projecting beauty, strength, or wisdom they cannot yet claim. The bitter critic who despises arrogance may in truth be condemning a pride they secretly fear in themselves. The parent who lashes out at a child's rebellion may be punishing the inner rebel they long ago buried. Jung warned that projection is a trap. It distorts reality, turning others into containers for our wounds and desires. Instead of meeting people as they truly are, we meet them as mirrors for what we cannot yet face in ourselves. This is how toxic bonds are formed, relationships heavy with disappointment, repetition, misunderstanding. We ask others to carry what we refuse to carry. And yet, projection can also be a teacher. If we dare to ask, what in me is being revealed by this person's presence? Suddenly, conflict becomes a doorway. The critic who infuriates you may be showing you a shadow you've ignored. The friend you admire may be awakening qualities you've been too afraid to claim. Every encounter is a chance to know yourself more deeply. There are no enemies, only teachers in disguise. Ancient cultures intuited this truth. In myths, the hero is always confronted by figures who embody their hidden fears or unclaimed strengths. Gilgamesh faces Enkidu, his wild twin. Arthur must confront Mordred, his shadowed son. In each story, the other is never truly separate. It is the soul reflected back. To reclaim projection is to begin clearing the fogged mirror of your life. One by one, you withdraw the images you cast onto others. Slowly, the mirror clears. And as it does, you begin to see people as they are. No longer distorted by your wounds, no longer idolized for your longings, you see them in their truth. And in that clarity, you see yourself. Because everything you judge, everything you desire, everything that shakes or stirs your heart in another, speaks of you. The world outside is not separate from your soul. It is the stage upon which your inner life plays itself out, begging to be acknowledged. So the next time someone ignites a strong reaction in you, anger, envy, fascination, pause. Resist the urge to react. Instead, ask, what part of me is being reflected in this mirror? And then listen, because the soul does not shout. It whispers, and its whispers are often heard most clearly in the voices of others. When the noise of the day subsides and the body sinks into sleep, another world awakens. In that world, logic dissolves, time bends, and the soul begins to speak in its own mysterious tongue. Jung believed dreams were not random, not meaningless flickers of the mind, but messages from the unconscious, encrypted symbols, fragments of truth rising to the surface. To ignore them is to ignore the deepest voice within us. Think of the dreams you've had, falling endlessly through the air, standing naked in a crowd, being chased by something you cannot see, meeting animals, fire, strangers with familiar eyes. Each carries meaning, not universal, but personal, a language crafted for you alone. Jung wrote that to listen to dreams is to listen to the soul's direct speech. Humanity has always known this. In ancient Greece, people traveled to the temples of Asclepius, the god of healing, where they would sleep in sacred chambers and await a dream that revealed their cure. In Egypt, priests recorded dreams as divine messages, maps for both personal fate and the destiny of the kingdom. In the Bible, Joseph rose from prisoner to Pharaoh's counselor through his gift of dream interpretation. And in Native American traditions, the dream catcher was woven not as a decoration, but as a spiritual tool to filter the messages of the night. Across civilizations, dreams were never dismissed. They were revelations. Why do we forget this now? Why do we reduce dreams to mere static, random firings of the brain? Perhaps because their language unsettles us. Dreams show us what the waking mind avoids. They remind us of wounds we have buried, desires we dare not admit, truths we refuse to face. And yet they also show us treasures, creativity, symbols of love, archetypes of courage, whispers of futures yet to come. Jung taught that within dreams dwell archetypes, timeless figures that live in the collective unconscious of humanity. The child, reminding us of innocence and vulnerability. The hero, urging us toward courage. The lover, awakening passion. The destroyer, demanding transformation. These are not strangers, they are pieces of us, speaking in masks and symbols. Perhaps you have dreamt of water. For one person, it may be fear of drowning, the unconscious overwhelming the ego. For another, it may be baptism, renewal, the soul's cleansing. Fire may mean destruction or purification. Animals may embody instincts long ignored. The meaning is never in a dictionary, but in the dialogue between you and your own depths. To dream, then, is not to escape reality. It is to remember it. To remember who you were before the world told you who to be. To remember the soul you silenced in order to fit in. Dreams are not distractions from life. They are the compass pointing you back to it. And this is why the modern world so often dismisses them. We celebrate productivity, speed, appearance. Who has time to pause in the morning and listen to the strange story Their unconscious told them in the night. Who dares to sit with the confusion of symbols instead of rushing to the clarity of schedules and tasks? Only those who are ready to awaken. Only those who have realized that the soul does not shout in daylight. It whispers in dreams. So do not dismiss your dreams. Write them down, sit with them, ask them what they mean. Because they are not noise. They are lighthouses in the dark, guiding you toward the self you left behind. They are fragments of gold buried in the depths of your unconscious, waiting for you to claim them. When you listen, something begins to heal. Slowly, silently, the forgotten parts of you stir. And in that remembering, you begin to walk the path of wholeness once more. We live surrounded by noise, not just the blare of machines, the hum of cities, or the endless notifications that pull at our attention, but also the noise inside our minds, thoughts that loop endlessly, regrets replaying the past, anxieties rehearsing the future, other people's voices lodged in our heads, echoing their expectations and judgments. And in the middle of that storm, the soul withdraws. It hides, it shrinks, it waits. Yet within each of us lies a sanctuary untouched by the clamor of the world. A place of stillness, where time seems to vanish, where you are not required to prove or perform. A space where you are simply allowed to be. That place is silence. Jung understood that silence is not emptiness, but presence. It is the doorway through which the unconscious begins to rise. Only when the noise fades does the soul reveal its images. Throughout history, seekers of truth have always known this. The monks of Christian monasteries embraced the great silence, an unbroken quiet that allowed them to hear the whisper of God within. Samurai warriors practiced meditation before battle, stepping into silence to steady their spirit. In the deserts of Egypt, hermits withdrew from society not to escape life, but to confront it at its rawest, alone, in silence. Even rulers feared silence. Oppressive regimes across history have filled the air with propaganda, songs, and slogans because they knew silence makes people think, and thinking makes people free. But in our age, silence has become something we almost fear. We fill every pause with a screen, every waiting moment with distraction. Why? Because silence confronts us with ourselves. It reveals the emptiness we've tried to cover with busyness. It brings to the surface the grief, the longing, the shadow we've been running from. Noise protects us from this confrontation, but it also robs us of clarity. What happens when we dare to remain in silence? At first, it is uncomfortable. Restless thoughts race. The body fidgets. The mind searches for escape. But if we stay, if we endure, a shift begins. The noise loosens its grip. A deeper calm arises, one not dependent on circumstances, but rooted in being itself. In that calm, the soul speaks, not in shouts or commands, but in whispers, in images, in subtle clarity. Silence, then, is not absence. It is absolute presence. It strips away the illusions we use to define ourselves and reveals what is essential. It tells us you don't need to be more, you need to be less. Less distracted, less divided, less consumed by the expectations of the world. In that stripping away, you remember who you are. And this is precisely why silence is dangerous. Because a person who can dwell in silence can no longer be manipulated. They no longer need to chase approval or drown themselves in distraction. They become centered, grounded, whole. Jung knew that silence was one of the gateways to individuation, because only when you can hear the quiet voice within do you begin to live from your soul. So ask yourself, when was the last time you stopped, truly stopped? No phone, no plans, no rehearsing, no remembering, just sitting, breathing, listening. It may feel like nothing, but that nothing is everything. It is the first step back to yourself. We spend so much of our lives running from pain. We disguise it with distractions, numb it with pleasure, bury it under busyness. We treat it as the enemy, as if pain were proof that something has gone terribly wrong. But Jung knew better. He saw that pain is not a punishment, it is a passage. The fire that sears us is also the fire that transforms us. Think about the moments in your own life when suffering cracked you open, the heartbreak that left you breathless, the failure that shattered your certainty, the loss that stripped you bare. In those moments, the polished mask crumbles, the ego's defenses fall away, and what remains is raw, unfiltered truth. Pain, more than comfort, forces us to face ourselves. History has always recognized this. The mystics spoke of the dark night of the soul, where all light disappears and faith itself feels lost. But they knew that beyond that night waited a deeper dawn. Nelson Mandela's decades in prison forged not only endurance, but a vision for freedom stronger than any chains. St. John of the Cross wrote poetry from his cell, comparing suffering to a furnace where the soul is refined into gold. Even ordinary lives tell the same story. Mothers who emerge stronger from grief, survivors who turn wounds into wisdom, broken hearts that learn to love more truthfully. Pain, when met with awareness, is alchemy. It burns away illusion and leaves only what is real. But this is not automatic. Many remain trapped in their wounds, replaying them endlessly, making their suffering into identity. They become victims of their own stories, chained not by pain itself, but by their refusal to see through it. The difference lies in whether we resist or accept. If we resist, pain imprisons. If we accept, pain initiates. Jung compared it to the process of descent into the underworld. Terrifying, necessary, inevitable. It is not meant to destroy us, but to strip us of what is false. Only then can the soul rise. Think of a forest fire. At first glance, it looks like devastation, flames consuming everything in sight. But when the fire has passed, new growth emerges from the ash. Seeds that could not germinate in the shadow of towering trees now find light. In the same way, our wounds become fertile ground for rebirth, and yet our culture avoids this truth. We are taught that happiness means constant comfort, that suffering has no value. We are told to medicate, to escape, to deny. But those who dare to walk through the fire discover something no one can take away: resilience, clarity, and above all, authenticity. Because when you have faced pain and survived, you no longer fear life. You carry within you a strength deeper than success, deeper than approval. The quiet, unshakable strength of someone who has walked through hell and returned with their soul intact. So stop running. Stop numbing. Let the fire do its work. Ask your companion, what are you here to teach me? And listen, because the wound, as the poet Rumi once said, is where the light enters you. Not everything that is lost is gone forever. Sometimes what seems to have vanished is only waiting, folded inward, hidden beneath layers of fear, shame, or routine. The soul is like that. It does not die. It does not abandon you. It waits for the moment you are ready to return. Jung understood that all inner work, facing the shadow, listening to dreams, dwelling in silence, walking through pain, points to one sacred task: bringing back the exiled soul. The parts of yourself you silenced to fit in, the truths you buried to be accepted, the desires you abandoned to feel safe. Individuation is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering. This return rarely happens in a grand revelation. More often, it begins with small, almost imperceptible acts. The courage to say no when everything in you has been trained to say yes. The honesty to admit your grief instead of smiling through it. The choice to sit in stillness when the world demands constant movement. Each small act is a portal. Each one gives you back a fragment of yourself. And piece by piece, the soul returns. You begin to feel again the sharpness of joy, the depth of sorrow, the tenderness of love. Your eyes regain their light. Your creativity stirs. You no longer move like a machine through rehearsed motions. You move like someone awake. Cultures have always told this story in symbols. The phoenix, consumed by fire, rises from its own ashes, reborn not as something else, but as itself renewed. Osiris, dismembered in Egyptian myth, is gathered piece by piece until he lives again. Even Christ's resurrection is not only about triumph over death, but about returning to life whole, transformed. These stories endure because they echo the same truth. What has been broken can be made whole, but not by denial, by integration. The return of the soul is not perfection. It does not mean you will never falter again, never feel fear, never stumble into shadow. Wholeness is not about erasing wounds. It is about embracing them. Your cracks do not make you less. They make you real. Just as Japanese kintsugi repairs broken pottery with veins of gold, your life can shine more brightly through the very places it was once fractured. This is why Jung said that individuation is not about becoming ideal, but about becoming indivisible. To be whole is not to be flawless. It is to stop abandoning yourself, to live no longer in fragments, but as one. It will not always be easy. There will be days when you feel you are slipping backward, when doubt gnaws, when silence feels unbearable. But if you can hold yourself from within, if you can remain faithful to your truth, you will discover something that cannot be taken away, the unshakable strength of living as yourself. And in that strength, everything changes. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to impress. You no longer need to trade your soul for comfort or approval. You inhabit yourself fully. You breathe in your truth. You live from your center. This is the return of the soul, not a destination, but a homecoming. And in that homecoming lies the quiet miracle of being alive, not half alive, not masked or fragmented, but wholly, deeply, truly alive. We have come to the end of the journey, but endings are not always closures. Sometimes they are thresholds. To walk this path, to confront the mask, to face the shadow, to listen to dreams, to embrace silence, to pass through the fire of pain, is to arrive at the threshold of something new, something sacred. Because what ends here is not your story, but the lie that you are not enough, the lie that you are powerless, the lie that you must keep betraying yourself to belong. When the soul returns, those illusions dissolve, and what remains is truth. Think of the great mystics and poets who walked before us. Rumi wrote, "Don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." Teresa of Avila described the soul as a castle filled with hidden chambers waiting for us to enter. Thoreau withdrew to Walden Pond to strip life down to its essentials, to live deliberately and discover the marrow of existence. Each, in their own way, crossed the same threshold, the moment when life is no longer lived from the surface, but from the soul. You may not feel ready. Few ever do. But the truth is, the journey has already begun. The very fact that you've listened this far, that something in these words stirred within you, means a part of your soul has already awakened. The threshold is not ahead. It is here, now. What does it mean to step across it? It does not mean your life suddenly becomes easy or that the world bends to your will. The storms remain. The shadows still whisper. But you are no longer the same. You face them with a different strength, the quiet, unshakable strength of someone who knows who they are. And when one person changes the way they see, the world itself begins to shift. Transformation is contagious. A soul that has returned to its self radiates clarity, compassion, authenticity. It becomes a light, not because it tries to shine, but because it cannot help but be. This life, this one brief, unrepeatable life, is not meant to be wasted on masks and noise. It is meant to be lived from the depth of who you truly are. To cross this threshold is to reclaim that sacred responsibility. To say, I will no longer abandon myself. I will no longer silence my soul. I am ready to live. So, if you feel that tremor in your chest, that flicker you cannot quite name, listen. That is your soul knocking, whispering, returning. It is the true beginning of your life. Step across the threshold. Live from that place. Breathe from there. Walk from there. Because to live from the soul is to live in freedom, and that is sacred.